My husband openly flirted with his coworker right in front of me, and when I finally spoke up he shrugged and said, "If you can't handle it, walk away." So I did. And later that night I made a choice he never imagined, one that reminded me exactly who I am and what I refuse to tolerate. If you can't handle me talking to a colleague without getting insecure about it, maybe you should just walk away. My husband Levi said those words to me at a charity gala in front of dozens of people. His colleagues, his boss, the woman he'd been sleeping with for 7 weeks. His hand was still resting on her lower back when he told me to leave. Her name was Sienna. She was 26, blonde, his direct report at work. And she was smiling. "I'm Hazel. I'm 33 years old. And I'm about to tell you what happened when I actually took my husband's advice and walked away, and what I did next that he never saw coming. But let me back up 6 weeks because that's when I started noticing the signs I'd been ignoring for months. I'm a senior accountant at a non-profit auditing firm in Phoenix. I'm good with numbers, good at finding discrepancies, good at spotting when something doesn't add up. My job is literally to look at financial records and find the holes people try to hide. So it's almost funny, painful but funny, that I missed the holes in my own marriage for as long as I did. Levi and I met at a networking mixer when I was 27. He was 29, a sales director with one of those smiles that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He actually listened when I talked about tax law, which most people's eyes glaze over at. He didn't blink when I ordered the expensive Pinot Noir. He made me laugh during a conversation about depreciation schedules, which I didn't think was possible. We got married a year later in a ceremony his mother planned down to the napkin colors. Cream with gold trim, very tasteful, very expensive. We bought a renovated craftsman house in Arcadia with both our names on the mortgage. The kind of place with original hardwood floors and a backyard pool that made our friends comment goals on every photo. For the first few years we were good. Not perfect, nobody's perfect, but solid. We packed each other's lunches. We split the remote without arguing. We had inside jokes and weekend routines and a life that felt like it was going somewhere. People called us a power couple. Dual income, no kids yet, the Instagram-ready existence that collected heart emojis from college friends I hadn't seen in years. But somewhere around year 4, things started shifting in ways I didn't have words for yet. The man who used to ask about my day stopped asking. The man who used to kiss me goodbye in the morning started leaving for work before I woke up. Our conversations became transactional. "Who's picking up groceries? Did you pay the electric bill? I'll be home late tonight." I told myself it was normal. That marriage is mature. That passion fades into comfortable routine, and expecting butterflies after 6 years was unrealistic. I was lying to myself. But I didn't know that yet. It started with his phone. Levi had never been protective of it before. He'd leave it on the counter while he showered, toss it on the couch during movies, hand it to me if mine was dead and I needed to look something up. Then one Tuesday morning in late July, I woke up and noticed it face down on his nightstand. Not just set down casually, but positioned deliberately so the screen wasn't visible. When I picked it up to check the weather, something I'd done 100 times before, I found it locked with a password I didn't know. "New security protocol at work," Levi said when I asked over coffee that morning. He didn't look up from his toast. "Company got hacked last month. IT's making everyone use biometrics and complex passwords. Big hassle, but they're serious about it." It sounded reasonable. Everything Levi said always sounded reasonable. That's what made him good at sales. He could make anything sound logical, necessary, like you were the paranoid one for questioning it. But then came the pattern I couldn't explain away as easily. Late nights. Wednesdays and Fridays specifically. Like clockwork. Around 5 p.m. my phone would buzz with a text. "Client dinner running late. Don't wait up." Never with details about which client or which restaurant. Never an invitation for me to join. He'd come home around 10 or sometimes later, smelling like wine and something floral that definitely wasn't my perfume. Something lighter, younger, more expensive than anything I wore. He'd go straight to the shower, claiming he felt grimy from the restaurant, from shaking hands all evening, from the cigarette smoke on the patio where deals supposedly got closed. I suggested joining him once. We were doing dishes after a quiet dinner at home, one of the few nights he'd actually been there, and I said it casually, "Maybe I could come to one of these client dinners sometime? It might be nice to meet the people you work with." He stopped scrubbing the pan he was holding. "That's not really appropriate, Hazel. These are high-stakes prospects. They wouldn't appreciate a spouse tagging along. It would make things uncomfortable, kill the rapport I'm building. I'm good at talking to people. I do it at work all the time. It's different. Trust me on this. So I dropped it. But I didn't stop noticing things. Like the name that started appearing in our conversations with uncomfortable frequency. Sienna. He mentioned her casually at first. Sienna from marketing put together a solid campaign deck today. Or, Sienna had an interesting idea about the messaging. Normal work stuff. Colleagues talk about colleagues. I talk about people from my office all the time. But by early August her name was showing up multiple times a day. Sienna thinks we should target younger donors. Sienna's idea for the presentation got approved by the executive team. Sienna's really sharp, actually you'd probably like her. I started counting after the third day of this. 19 mentions in 4 days. 19 times my husband said another woman's name with a brightness in his voice that he didn't use when he talked about me anymore. 19 times I felt something twist in my chest that I tried to ignore. The way his face changed when his phone lit up with notifications. How he'd be staring at the screen with this small, private smile. The kind of smile people get when they're texting someone who makes them happy, then quickly lock it the second I walked into the room. How he started angling his body away from me when he typed, physically shielding whatever conversation he was having. One night I walked into the living room and found him on the couch with his phone, grinning at something. When he heard my footsteps he jumped slightly and locked the screen so fast he almost dropped it. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just Marcus from work. He sent a funny meme about the boss." "Can I see it?" His expression shifted. "Why?" "Because I want to see what made you smile like that. I haven't seen you smile like that in months." "Hazel, it's just a stupid meme. Why are you making this weird?" And there it was again. I was the one making things weird. Not his secrecy. Not the password-protected phone or the late nights or the name he mentioned more than mine. Me for noticing. Me for asking questions. Me for wanting to see what made my husband happier than I apparently did anymore. I tried asking about Sienna directly once. We were eating takeout Thai food in front of the TV because we'd stopped sitting at the actual dinner table months ago, and I said it as casually as I could manage. "This Sienna you mention a lot. How long has she been with the company?" Levi's entire body went rigid. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. You talk about her quite a bit." "She's a colleague, Hazel. A coworker. Why do you have to interrogate me about every person I mention from work?" "I'm not interrogating. I'm asking a simple question." "It doesn't feel simple. It feels like you're keeping tabs on me, like you don't trust me. That's not healthy." My face got hot. "I do trust you. I'm just trying to understand why you mention one specific coworker 19 times in 4 days." His fork clattered against his plate. "Are you seriously counting how many times I mention people? Hazel, that's not normal. That's controlling." And just like that I was the problem. Not his obvious infatuation with someone else. Not the lies about where he was spending his evenings. Not the hotel receipt I'd found 2 weeks earlier tucked in his gray suit pocket. Kimpton Hotel, Old Town Scottsdale, $385, checked out at 11:47 p.m. on a night he claimed he was at a client dinner. Me. I was the problem for noticing. For counting. For making everything weird. So I stopped asking. But I didn't stop paying attention. 3 weeks before the gala. 3 weeks before everything exploded in that hotel ballroom. Levi came home actually energized for the first time in months. He found me in the kitchen making dinner and said, "So the Children's Hospital fundraiser is coming up. It's at the Phoenician this year." I looked up from chopping vegetables. "Okay. I think we should both go. It's a great networking opportunity and your firm sponsors it too, right? You could write it off as a business expense." I stopped chopping. Levi had been to this fundraiser twice before in previous years. Both times he'd complained, too formal, too boring, too many speeches from donors who loved hearing themselves talk. Both times he'd gone alone, said it wasn't worth me taking the night off. And now suddenly he wanted me there. I should have seen it. The red flag waving directly in my face. But I was so desperate for any sign that he still wanted me around, that I still mattered to him, that our marriage wasn't completely dead. I ignored every instinct screaming that something was wrong. "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "Yeah, that sounds nice. We haven't been to something like that together in a while." "Exactly. It'll be good for us." I went shopping for a new dress that weekend. Jade green, fitted, elegant. The kind of dress that used to make Levi stop whatever he was doing and tell me I looked beautiful. I got my hair done at a salon I couldn't really afford. I bought new heels that pinched my toes but made my legs look good. I convinced myself that maybe this event would be the reset we needed. The night we'd reconnect and remember why we got married in the first place. I was so painfully, desperately wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Not while I was getting ready. Not while I was driving to the Phoenician separately because Levi said he had to stop by the office first. Not while I was standing in that elegant ballroom thinking maybe tonight would be different. I didn't know yet that the fundraiser wasn't going to save my marriage. It was going to be the night I finally stopped lying to myself about what my husband had become. The night he'd tell me to walk away in front of everyone we knew. And the night I'd start planning exactly how to make him regret it. The Friday of the gala arrived faster than I was ready for. I spent the afternoon getting ready with an anxious energy I couldn't quite name, telling myself it was excitement, that tonight would be good for us, that maybe Levi's invitation meant he was trying. He came home around 5 to change. I was already in my jade green dress, hair styled in loose waves that had taken the salon an hour to perfect. I waited for him to notice, to say something, to give me any indication that he saw me. He walked past me toward the bedroom without a word. "You look nice," I offered, watching him pull his suit from the closet. "Thanks," he said absently, checking his phone. I stood in the doorway while he changed, watching him adjust his tie in the mirror for what must have been the 4th time. He tilted his head, smoothed down the fabric, checked his profile from both angles. More attention than he'd given me in months. "So, should we leave around 6:30? I asked. He didn't turn around. "Actually, I need to stop by the office first. Last-minute tweaks to a presentation I'm giving Monday. You should just go ahead and I'll meet you there." Something cold settled in my stomach. "We're going to the same place. Why don't I just wait and we can go together? Because I don't know how long it'll take and I don't want you sitting in the car waiting for me. Just go ahead. I'll be there soon." He sprayed cologne. Too much of it, the scent filling our bedroom in a way that felt aggressive. Then he grabbed his keys and wallet, kissed the top of my head without looking at me, and left. I heard his car start in the driveway, heard him pull away. I stood there in our bedroom alone, wearing a dress I'd bought to save my marriage, and felt something crack inside my chest. 20 minutes later I drove to the Phoenician resort by myself. The valet line was long, couples arriving together, the women's hands tucked into their husbands' elbows, laughing about something as they walked toward the entrance. I handed my keys to the attendant and walked in alone, clutching my small purse like it might anchor me. The ballroom was stunning in that expensive neutral way that rich people call elegant. Cream walls, gold accents everywhere, massive chandeliers hanging from the ceiling reflecting light off polished marble floors. Waiters in black vests circulated with trays of champagne. A string quartet played something classical in the corner that I didn't recognize. Small clusters of people stood talking, everyone dressed in their best, everyone performing the social dance of charity fundraisers. I pulled out my phone and texted Levi, "I'm here. Where are you?" The response came 30 seconds later. "Be there soon." That was it. "No, sorry for making you arrive alone." "No, you look beautiful tonight." Just 2 words and nothing else. I wandered toward the silent auction tables, pretending to be fascinated by the items up for bidding. A weekend getaway package to Sedona. A signed basketball from some Suns player I didn't recognize. A private cooking class with a local chef. I stared at the bid sheets without really seeing them, feeling increasingly foolish in my jade dress that suddenly seemed like it was trying too hard. Like I was trying too hard. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. I checked my phone twice. No new messages. I texted him again. "Are you close?" No response. I was about to call him when I spotted him across the ballroom. He'd arrived without telling me, without looking for me, without any acknowledgement that his wife was standing alone at a charity event he'd insisted we attend together. And he wasn't alone. He was deep in conversation with a woman I recognized from his company's website. One of those professional headshot pages where everyone looks polished and accomplished. Tina. The name I'd heard 19 times in 4 days. The name that made his voice brighten in a way mine didn't anymore. She was younger than I expected. Mid-20s, probably not even 30 yet. Blonde highlights that caught the chandelier light perfectly, like she'd planned it. wearing a red dress that walked the line between professional and provocative, fitted but not too tight. Sophisticated but deliberately sexy. The kind of dress that announced she knew exactly what she looked like and exactly what effect it would have. But it wasn't her appearance that made my stomach drop. It was the way Levi was looking at her. He was leaning in when she spoke, his body angled toward hers, giving her his complete attention in a way he hadn't given me in months. Maybe longer. She said something and he laughed, not the polite chuckle he'd been giving me for the past year, but a real laugh, head thrown back, genuine enjoyment. The laugh I used to make him do before everything got comfortable and then cold. Her hand was on his forearm. I watched it land there casually like it had done this 1,000 times before. Watched it rest there for 3 full seconds, I counted, before sliding away. Then a minute later it was back. Touching his shoulder this time while she leaned in to whisper something that made him grin. I stood frozen near the silent auction tables, unable to move, unable to look away. Every touch felt deliberate. Every laugh felt intimate. Every moment I watched felt like a small knife sliding between my ribs. Other people were noticing too. I caught 2 women I vaguely recognized from a previous company event exchanging glances, then looking at me with expressions that might have been pity. A man standing near the bar, older, distinguished, probably someone's boss, was watching Levi and Sienna with raised eyebrows, like he was witnessing something inappropriate but couldn't quite decide if he should intervene. Then Marcus appeared beside me. I remembered him from a summer barbecue at Levi's boss's house. Nice guy, quiet, worked in operations or logistics or something. He positioned himself deliberately between me and the view of my husband flirting with his coworker. "Hazel, right?" he said, voice aggressively cheerful. "Great to see you again. Have you checked out the silent auction? Some really interesting items this year." He was trying to distract me. Trying to spare me from watching what everyone else was clearly seeing. It was kind. It was also humiliating. "Yeah," I managed. "I was just looking. That Sedona package looks amazing. My wife and I went there last spring. Beautiful hiking, great restaurants. Totally worth it if you can get it for a reasonable bid." I nodded, pretending to listen, but my attention kept pulling back to Levi and Sienna across the room. Marcus kept talking about hiking trails and red rocks, filling the silence with words that didn't matter, and I appreciated it even as it made me want to disappear. After 10 minutes of this painful kindness, I made a decision. I was done hiding at silent auction tables. I was done being protected by near strangers who felt sorry for me. If Levi wanted to parade his affair in front of everyone we knew, then I was going to make him look me in the eye while he did it. I grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter and walked straight toward them. Sienna saw me first. Her eyes flicked to me, and for just a second, I saw irritation flash across her face. Annoyance at the interruption, at the wife showing up to ruin whatever moment they were having. Then her expression smoothed into professional politeness, the mask sliding into place so fast I almost doubted I'd seen the real reaction underneath. "Hazel," Levi said, accepting the champagne I handed him without making eye contact. Without thanking me. Without acknowledging that I'd been waiting alone for 45 minutes while he laughed with another woman. "This is Sienna from marketing. Sienna, my wife. Not, my wife Hazel. Not, Hazel, who I'm lucky to be married to. Not even, this is Hazel. Just, my wife. A category, a title, a role I fulfilled rather than a person he loved." Sienna extended a manicured hand, her smile perfectly practiced. "Oh, I've heard so much about you." The lie was so transparent it was almost funny. Levi never talked about me at work. I knew because his colleagues had stopped asking how I was at these events. When someone's name never comes up in conversation, people stop inquiring. They just do. "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking her hand briefly. Then I tried to join their conversation. I really tried. Over the next hour, I attempted 4 separate times to be part of whatever discussion they were having. Each time, Levi either talked over me mid-sentence or Sienna would pivot to some inside joke about the office. Something about a presentation gone wrong, about their boss's terrible golf stories, about the new hire who couldn't figure out the coffee machine. Things deliberately designed to exclude the wife who didn't belong. When I mentioned that some of the silent auction items looked interesting, Levi actually sighed. Audibly. Like I was a child interrupting adult conversation with something trivial and annoying. Sienna touched his shoulder and leaned in, whispering something I couldn't hear. He grinned, That private, intimate grin that used to be reserved for me, and whispered something back. She laughed, her hand lingering on his arm. I stood there holding my champagne, invisible. Irrelevant. A prop in someone else's story. After 90 minutes of this, something inside me finally broke. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like a bone cracking under pressure it was never meant to hold. I interrupted them mid-sentence. Levi, I'd like to leave soon. I'm not feeling well. He looked at me like I'd announced I was setting the building on fire. Now. We just got here. We've been here almost 2 hours. Sienna glanced between us, her expression carefully neutral, but I saw the satisfaction underneath. He was enjoying this. Watching me beg my husband to leave, watching him choose her attention over my comfort, watching me lose in real time. We've been here almost 2 hours, I repeated quietly. Levi's jaw tightened. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. Marcus was still nearby. That couple by the bar was definitely listening. Look, if you can't handle me talking to a colleague without getting insecure about it, maybe you should just walk away. The words landed like a slap. Even Sienna's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the cruelty maybe, or just surprised he'd said it out loud. The couple by the bar suddenly became fascinated by their phones. Marcus's expression shifted from uncomfortable to shocked. And I just stood there, staring at this stranger wearing my husband's face, holding a champagne glass in a jade green dress I'd bought to save a marriage that was already dead. You know what? I said, setting my glass down on a nearby table with exaggerated care. You're absolutely right. Then I turned and walked straight toward the exit. I walked through the marble lobby without looking back. Past the registration desk where elegant people checked in for weekend getaways. Past the valet stand where attendants in burgundy vests called out ticket numbers. Straight to the self-park garage where my car sat under fluorescent lights that made everything look pale and institutional. My hands were shaking when I unlocked the door. I sat behind the wheel for a full minute before starting the engine, just breathing, trying to process what had just happened. Levi had told me to walk away. In front of his colleagues. In front of his boss. In front of the woman he'd been sleeping with. And I'd actually done it. The drive home took 20 minutes. I didn't turn on music. Didn't turn on the radio. Just drove in complete silence. Nothing but the sound of my own breathing and the hum of tires on pavement, the occasional traffic light clicking from red to green in the empty Friday night streets. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. All the lights off, exactly how I'd left them hours ago when I thought I was going to a charity gala that might save my marriage. I sat in the car for 5 minutes, staring at the front door, knowing that once I walked through it, something fundamental would shift. That I'd be entering a different house than the one I'd left. Or maybe I'd be a different person. Maybe both. Inside, I didn't turn on the overhead lights. Just the small lamp in the kitchen that cast everything in warm yellow tones that felt wrong for the moment. I opened the wine fridge, the expensive one Levi had insisted we needed, the one that held bottles we were supposedly saving for special occasions, and pulled out the Cabernet we'd been keeping for our anniversary in October. $180 bottle. Anniversary gift from his parents 2 years ago that we'd never opened because we were waiting for the right moment. This felt like the right moment. I poured myself a very large glass and sat down at the kitchen island. My phone was on the counter, buzzing constantly. I ignored it for the first 10 minutes, just sipping wine and staring at the backsplash tile we'd picked out together 3 years ago. Levi had wanted white subway tile. I'd wanted something with more character. We'd compromised on a pale blue mosaic that now just looked sad in the dim lighting. Finally, I picked up my phone. 32 messages. All from Levi. I read them in order, watching the progression like a predictable script. What was that? You embarrassed me in front of my boss. People are asking where you went. Everyone's staring at me. Hazel, answer your phone. This is ridiculous. We need to talk about this like adults. Fine. Ignore me. But you made a scene and now I have to deal with the fallout. Then about 20 messages in, the tone shifted from defensive anger to something that resembled panic. Are you home? I'm getting worried. Please just let me know you're okay. People are asking if everything's all right. I don't know what to tell them. And finally, the last few messages landed on forced concern. I'm leaving now. We need to talk when I get home. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he acknowledge what he'd said or how he'd said it. Not once did he take responsibility for telling his wife to walk away while his mistress watched. I set the phone down and took another sip of wine. It was good wine. Probably wasted on this moment, but I didn't care. What Levi didn't know, what he'd never bothered to notice because he was too busy with Sienna, was that I'd been documenting everything for 3 weeks. Not because I was planning to leave him. Not because I knew for certain he was cheating. But because some instinct I didn't fully understand had told me to pay attention, to keep records, to build a case I didn't yet know I was building. It started small. A credit card charge that didn't make sense. $247 at a restaurant I'd never heard of. The Mission, some upscale place in Old Town Scottsdale. The date was a Wednesday in mid-July, one of those nights Levi had texted to say he'd be late because of a client dinner. I'd been annoyed but not suspicious. Client dinners happened. That was his job. But then I'd looked closer at the itemized receipt that came through our email, because Levi, efficient salesman that he was, forwarded all business expenses to our shared account for tax purposes. 2 entrees. 2 desserts. A bottle of wine that cost more than our monthly water bill. And the timestamp, 9:47 p.m. What client dinner lasted until almost 10 on a Wednesday night? I'd screenshotted it. Filed it away in a folder on my phone I'd labeled receipts, because that sounded mundane enough that Levi would never question it if he happened to see it. Then came another charge. Kimpton Hotel, Old Town Scottsdale. $385. Also on a Wednesday. I'd found the actual receipt in his gray suit pocket, the one he'd forgotten to empty before I took it to the dry cleaner. Room charge, not just restaurant or bar. Someone had rented a room. I'd stood in our bedroom holding that crumpled thermal paper, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood what I was seeing. Checked out at 11:47 p.m. The same night he'd come home smelling like wine and floral perfume. The same night he'd gone straight to the shower. The same night he told me he was exhausted from closing a big deal. I'd photographed the receipt. Added it to the folder. Then I'd started checking our shared cloud storage. The one we used for household documents, for photos, for the automatic backup of emails that Levi had set up years ago and then completely forgotten about. And there they were. Hotel receipts forwarded to his email. Dinner charges at expensive restaurants. All on Wednesdays and Fridays. All for 2 people. All during the same weeks he'd been coming home late claiming client dinners and important meetings. I downloaded everything. Created a spreadsheet with dates, locations, amounts. Accountant brain taking over, organizing the evidence into something clear and undeniable. Then 2 weeks ago I'd seen the text notification flash across his locked phone screen. He'd been in the shower, phone sitting on the bathroom counter, and it had lit up with a message preview before the screen went dark. Last night was perfect. When can we do it again? The message disappeared after 15 seconds. Some auto-delete feature he must have set up. But I'd seen it. I'd seen enough. That's when I'd hired the private investigator. Her name was Diane Fletcher. I'd found her through a discreet Google search at work during my lunch break, using incognito mode like I was doing something illegal. She had good reviews, a professional website, and a tagline that said, "Answers you can trust." I'd called her from my car in the office parking lot. "I think my husband is having an affair," I'd said, voice surprisingly steady. "I need to know for sure." She hadn't asked unnecessary questions. Hadn't made me justify why I suspected. Just took down the details. Levi's name, his workplace, his schedule, the patterns I'd noticed. She'd quoted me a price that made me wince but seemed worth it for the truth. "I'll have a preliminary report for you in 5 days, she'd said. 5 days later, the morning of the gala, she'd emailed me a PDF file with a subject line that just said, "Fletcher Investigation Report." I'd opened it in my car before going into work. Sat there reading page after page of surveillance notes, timestamps, photographs that made my hands go numb. Levi and Sienna had been sleeping together for 7 weeks. Every Wednesday evening client dinner was actually the Kimpton Hotel in Old Town Scottsdale. Same room, practically same time, like they had a standing reservation. Every Friday late meeting was drinks at her apartment in Tempe, a small complex off Rural Road where Diane had photographed them entering together at 7 p.m. and not leaving until past midnight. There were photos of them at restaurants. Photos of them in hotel parking garages. Photos of Levi's hand on Sienna's lower back. Of them laughing together. Of them kissing in his car before driving to separate locations. All of it documented with brutal, professional efficiency. I'd closed the PDF and sat in my car staring at the office building in front of me, unable to move. Unable to process. Unable to do anything except acknowledge that the marriage I'd been trying to save was already over. Had been over for weeks. Maybe months. Maybe longer than I wanted to admit. But I hadn't confronted him. Something told me to wait. To keep the evidence close. To be strategic instead of emotional. Now, sitting in my kitchen drinking anniversary wine while waiting for Levi to come home and expect forgiveness, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. Balance: $63,087. Money we'd been saving for years. For a down payment on a bigger house. For the kids Levi said he wanted in a few years when we're more established. For a future that I now understood was never going to happen. Not with me anyway. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to a different bank's website. One Levi didn't use. One he didn't even know I'd opened an account with 3 days ago, right after hiring Diane. Then I started transferring money. Not all of it, that would be too obvious, too easy for him to fight in court. Just careful amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts or raise immediate red flags. $3,000 on Monday. $2,500 on Thursday. $4,000 the following Tuesday. Over 2 weeks I'd quietly moved $38,000 into my personal account. Documented every transfer with screenshots. Kept digital receipts. Made sure everything was trackable and legal and defensible if anyone questioned it. I wasn't stealing. This was community property. Arizona was a no-fault divorce state, which meant everything got split 50-50 anyway. I was just making sure that when the inevitable happened, when Levi decided to leave me for Sienna, or when I finally worked up the courage to leave him, I wouldn't be left with nothing while he emptied our accounts out of spite or strategy. I'd made copies of everything else too. Mortgage documents showing I'd been making 80% of the payments for the past 2 years, even though Levi's ego would never let him admit his sales commissions had been declining. Car titles. Investment statements. His life insurance policy that still listed me as sole beneficiary. Something I was absolutely not telling him about until the divorce was final. I'd stored everything in a folder at my office. Physical copies in a locked drawer. Digital copies on a flash drive I kept in my purse. Away from the house. Away from Levi's ability to access or destroy them. 3 days before the gala, I'd consulted with divorce attorneys. Not 1, 3. I wanted to understand my options, wanted to hear different perspectives. Wanted to know exactly what I was walking into if this marriage ended. The third attorney I met with was a woman named Rebecca Fontaine. She had an office in downtown Phoenix with a view of the mountains, a reputation for being ruthless in court, and a direct way of talking that I appreciated. "How long have you known about the affair?" she'd asked. 3 weeks of proof. Months of suspicion. "Do you have documentation?" I'd shown her everything. The receipts, the photos, the private investigator's report. She'd leaned back in her chair and said something I'd never forget. "The person who files first controls the narrative. The person who's prepared wins." I'd hired her on the spot. She'd drafted divorce papers that afternoon but hadn't filed them yet. I'd told her I needed one more piece of evidence. Something undeniable that would prevent Levi from spinning this as my paranoia or insecurity. Something public enough that he couldn't gaslight me later. Those papers were sitting in my car trunk right now. Ready to file. Waiting. I heard Levi's car pull into the driveway. Heard the engine cut off. Heard the door slam. I took another sip of wine and waited. The front door opened with exaggerated quietness. The kind of careful silence someone uses when they're trying not to wake a sleeping person, even though every light in the house was still on. Levi's footsteps moved through the entryway, hesitated in the hallway, then continued toward the kitchen where he knew I'd be waiting. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me. I was sitting at the island with my wine glass, my laptop open in front of me, and an expression that I later realized must have looked disturbingly calm. Almost serene. Like I'd already made decisions he didn't know about yet. "Hey," he said carefully, voice soft, testing the temperature of the room. "You okay?" I took a sip of wine before answering. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "I'm fine." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, loosening his tie with one hand. "Look, about earlier, that got out of hand. I was stressed about work, the presentation on Monday, and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have said what I said. It wasn't an apology. It was blame shifting wrapped in apologetic language, responsibility deflected onto work stress and circumstances instead of choices he'd made. I'd heard him use this exact tactic with difficult clients. Acknowledge the problem without actually accepting fault. Make it about external factors. Position yourself as the reasonable one trying to move forward. You told me to walk away if I couldn't handle watching you flirt with another woman, I said, voice even. So I did. What's the problem? His face flushed. I wasn't flirting. Jesus, Hazel, I was networking. That's literally my job. That's how business works. If you can't understand the difference between professional relationship building and... I set my wine glass down with deliberate precision, the sound of it against the granite louder than it needed to be. I understand perfectly. You spent 2 hours with your hands on another woman. You introduced me as my wife, like I was furniture. You ignored me every time I tried to join the conversation. Then when I said I wanted to leave, you told me to walk away. Very clear communication, Levi. Crystal clear. You're twisting this. Am I? Because Marcus looked pretty uncomfortable watching you. That couple near the bar definitely noticed. I'm pretty sure Sienna's perfume is still on your jacket. His jaw tightened and I watched him shift tactics in real time, from defensive to offensive, from apologizing to attacking. It was almost predictable. You know what your problem is? He said, crossing his arms. You don't trust me. You never have. Healthy marriages require trust, Hazel. They require giving your partner the benefit of the doubt instead of jumping to the worst possible conclusion every time they talk to a colleague. I almost laughed. The audacity of him standing in our kitchen, smelling like another woman's perfume, lecturing me about trust while I had hotel receipts and surveillance photos documenting his affair. It was almost funny in how absurd it was. Trust is earned, not demanded, I said quietly. So you don't trust me? The question hung between us like smoke in still air. I looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him, at the man who used to make me laugh at networking events, who'd promised to build a life with me, who'd become this stranger defending his right to humiliate me in public while sleeping with his coworker. Should I asked. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. He stood there searching for words that would make this my fault, that would turn my reasonable question into evidence of my unreasonable behavior. But for once he had nothing. The silence stretched for 10 full seconds before he turned and walked toward the stairs. I heard his footsteps heavy on the hardwood, heard the bedroom door close. Not quite a slam, but close enough to communicate his frustration. I sat there alone in the kitchen finishing my wine and realized I felt nothing. No guilt for making him uncomfortable. No urge to follow him upstairs and smooth things over. No desire to be the peacemaker who apologized for having feelings about being disrespected. Just cold, clear certainty about what needed to happen next. I opened my laptop and pulled up my contacts. Found Marcus's number. We'd exchanged information at that summer barbecue months ago. One of those polite, let's keep in touch gestures that usually goes nowhere. I'd saved it under Marcus Levi's work, and never used it until now. At 12:47 a.m. I typed out a text. Hey, sorry to bother you late. Can we talk? I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then set my phone down and waited. Part of me expected no response. It was almost 1 a.m, he was probably asleep, he might not even want to get involved in whatever drama he'd witnessed at the gala. But 3 minutes later my phone buzzed. Of course. Everything okay? I called him. He answered on the second ring. Hazel. Yeah. I know it's late. I'm sorry. I needed to talk to someone who saw what happened tonight. Don't apologize. I'm glad you called. His voice was kind, concerned in a way that made my throat tighten. Are you okay? Not really. But I will be. We talked for 40 minutes. I sat at my kitchen island in the dim light, voice low so Levi wouldn't hear me upstairs. And Marcus told me everything I'd been suspecting but hadn't wanted to believe. He'd suspected the affair for weeks. Maybe longer. He'd seen Levi and Sienna leaving the office together on Wednesday evenings when most people had already gone home. Noticed how they'd linger in the break room, how their conversations would stop abruptly when someone else walked in. How Sienna would touch Levi's arm during meetings, not just casual touches but lingering ones, intimate ones. How Levi would lean into her space, how they'd whisper to each other, How they had this whole language of inside jokes and meaningful glances that excluded everyone else. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, Marcus admitted. I kept thinking maybe I was reading too much into it, maybe they were just close colleagues, maybe it wasn't my place to get involved. I didn't want to be the guy who ruins someone's marriage over a hunch. But tonight changed that? Yeah. Tonight was, Hazel, what he did to you in front of all those people was wrong. The way he treated you, the way he dismissed you, the way he told you to leave while she just stood there watching. I couldn't stay quiet after that. You deserved to know the truth. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I'd done enough crying over the past few weeks. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. He paused and I heard him take a breath like he was steeling himself. I have photos. From last Wednesday. I was working late on a project. Budget analysis that was due Thursday morning, and I saw them leaving together around 7. Levi said something to her that made her laugh, and the way she looked at him, it just felt wrong. So I followed them. My hand tightened around my phone. Where did they go? Kimpton Hotel in Old Town. They walked in together. I waited in my car for a while thinking maybe it was some kind of work meeting, maybe I was being paranoid. But they didn't come out. Not for hours. So I took some photos, just to have proof if it turned out to be what I thought it was. They finally left around 10:30. Separate cars, but I saw him kiss her in the parking garage before they drove away. I closed my eyes, feeling something settle in my chest. Not surprise, not shock, just the weight of confirmation. Can you send them to me? Already done. My phone buzzed with incoming messages. I opened the first photo and felt my breath catch despite knowing what I was going to see. Levi and Sienna entering the hotel lobby together. His hand was on her lower back. Not a casual guide, but possessive, intimate. The timestamp read 7:18 p.m. Her head was tilted toward him, smiling at something he'd said. Second photo. Them leaving at 10:33 p.m. Her hair was messier than it had been going in. His tie was gone. They both looked satisfied, relaxed, like they'd spent the evening doing exactly what I knew they'd been doing. Third photo. Levi kissing her in the parking garage. Not a peck on the cheek. A real kiss, his hand cupping her face, her body pressed against his. I stared at the photos for a long time, zooming in on details I didn't really need to see but couldn't look away from. The way she touched his chest. The way he smiled at her. That real, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Hazel, you still there? Yeah, I said, voice steadier than I expected. I'm here. I'm really sorry. I know seeing those can't be easy. Actually, it's easier than you'd think. Because now I'm not crazy. Now I'm not the paranoid wife who couldn't handle her husband talking to a colleague. Now I have proof. What are you going to do? I looked at the photos again, feeling something cold and crystalline settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. That had happened weeks ago, probably months ago if I was honest with myself. This was something else. Clarity. Purpose. The kind of focused determination that comes when you finally stop questioning yourself and start taking action. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, I said. This morning, actually, since it's already past midnight. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, good. He's an idiot. You deserve so much better than this. I know I do. We talked for a few more minutes. Marcus offering to be a witness if I needed one, giving me the contact information for his wife who'd been through a divorce and might have attorney recommendations, just being kind in a way that reminded me there were still decent people in the world. After we hung up, I immediately forwarded all the photos to Rebecca with a message. File first thing this morning. Serve him at his office during his 9 a.m. team meeting. I want everyone to see. Her response came through 2 minutes later. She was apparently awake too. Consider it done. This is going to be very satisfying. I set my phone down and sat in the quiet kitchen for a moment, just breathing. Then I stood up, walked to the wine fridge and pulled out the bottle of champagne we'd been saving for our 10-year anniversary. Expensive French champagne his parents had given us as a wedding gift, the kind you're supposed to save for milestone celebrations. This felt like a milestone. I didn't bother with a glass. Just opened the bottle. The cork popped satisfyingly loud in the silent house, and carried it outside to the backyard. The pool lights were still on, casting rippling blue patterns across the patio. I sat down on one of the lounge chairs and took a long drink straight from the bottle. Tasted like freedom. And somewhere upstairs, Levi was sleeping, completely unaware that by 9 a.m. his entire life was going to implode. I stayed up until almost 3 in the morning, sitting in the backyard with that champagne bottle, watching the pool lights create patterns on the water that looked like they were moving even though everything was perfectly still. Eventually I went inside, climbed the stairs and paused outside our bedroom door. I could hear Levi snoring, deep, regular breaths of someone sleeping soundly, unburdened by guilt or consequences. I slept in the guest room. Didn't bother with pajamas, just lay down on top of the covers in the clothes I'd worn to the gala that felt like it had happened years ago instead of hours. I didn't really sleep. Just closed my eyes and waited for morning. At 6:30 a.m. I heard Levi's alarm go off. Heard him moving around in the bedroom, shower running, closet doors opening and closing, the familiar sounds of his morning routine. I stayed in the guest room until I heard him go downstairs, then got up and went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked terrible. Eyes puffy, makeup smudged, hair tangled. I didn't care. When I came downstairs, Levi was in the kitchen making coffee. He glanced at me and I saw him register that I'd slept in the guest room, but he didn't mention it. Just poured coffee into his travel mug, added the specific amount of cream and sugar he always used, screwed the lid on tight. He was whistling. Actually whistling some tune I didn't recognize while he gathered his keys and wallet and phone from the counter. Like last night had been a minor disagreement we'd already moved past. Like telling your wife to walk away in front of dozens of people was just something that happens sometimes. No big deal, life goes on. He thought he'd won. That I'd sulked in the guest room, that he'd stood his ground about his networking, that this morning everything would reset to whatever dysfunctional normal we'd been living in for months. He had no idea what was about to happen. He walked over and kissed the top of my head, not my lips, not even my cheek, just a perfunctory kiss on my hair like I was a child or a pet. "Have a good day," he said in that absent tone people use when they're not really present, when they're already thinking about something else. "You too," I said quietly. I watched from the kitchen window as he backed out of the driveway in his silver sedan. Watched him pause at the stop sign at the end of our street. Watched his car disappear around the corner, heading toward his office where, in exactly 90 minutes, his entire world would implode in the most public way possible. I felt nothing. No guilt. No second thoughts. No last-minute urge to call Rebecca and tell her to hold off, to give him one more chance, to handle this privately instead of destroying him professionally. Just cold, clear certainty that this was exactly what needed to happen. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, not the cheap stuff Levi bought, but the expensive beans I'd been hiding in the back of the pantry, the ones I only used when he wasn't home because he'd complain about the cost. Made it in the French press he never used because he said it took too long. Added real cream instead of the artificial creamer he preferred. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with my phone and waited. At 9:03 a.m. Rebecca texted, "Process server just arrived. Heading into the building now." My heart was racing despite the calm I'd been feeling. This was it. The moment everything became real and irreversible. At 9:17 a.m., papers delivered. I stared at those two words for a long moment, imagining the scene. The conference room where Levi held his Monday morning team meetings. 12 colleagues sitting around the table. Sienna probably there too, sitting close to him, maybe still exchanging those meaningful glances they thought nobody noticed. The process server walking in asking Levi Garrison, in front of everyone. Handing him the manila envelope. Everyone watching. At 9:21 a.m. a longer message came through. "Your husband asked the server if this was a joke. Server said no, these are official divorce papers." According to my contact who works in that building, his face went completely white. Sienna left the conference room immediately, practically ran out. His boss pulled him into her office. Half the office saw the whole thing. "Stun Hazel. You made your statement." I read the message 3 times trying to feel something. Satisfaction maybe. Victory. Dad, I just felt tired. Relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for weeks and could finally exhale. My phone started ringing at 9:28 a.m. Levi's name lit up the screen, his contact photo from our wedding day staring back at me. Him in his tuxedo, smiling that genuine smile he used to have before everything got complicated. Before Sienna. Before the lies. I sent it to voicemail. It rang again 30 seconds later. Voicemail. Voicemail. By 10:30 a.m. I had 17 missed calls. I made myself another cup of coffee, carried it out to the back patio where the morning sun was already making everything hot and bright, and listened to the voicemails in order. First message, timestamp 9:29 a.m. What the hell did you do? Call me back. Now. His voice was tight with shock and anger, barely controlled. I could hear other voices in the background. People talking, probably colleagues asking what was going on. Second message, 9:35 a.m. Hazel, everyone saw that. A process server walked into my team meeting, and handed me divorce papers in front of Sienna, my boss, 12 colleagues. What were you thinking? You can't just, call me back. We need to talk about this. Panic was creeping into his voice now. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something closer to fear. Third message, 9:52 a.m. People are asking me questions I can't answer. My boss wants to meet with me in 10 minutes. This is insane, Hazel. This is not how adults handle marriage problems. We can work through this like rational people. Please call me. The anger was fading, replaced by desperation. He was starting to realize this wasn't a dramatic gesture he could talk me down from. This was real. By the fifth message he was begging, please just talk to me. I know you're upset about last night. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was wrong. But you're destroying my career, my reputation, everything I've built. Please just call me back so we can figure this out. By the 10th message he'd shifted to manipulation. I know you're upset, but this is too far. You're acting crazy. You're making decisions out of emotion instead of logic. You're going to regret this when you calm down. We can fix this, but not if you keep acting like this. Call me. I deleted all of them without responding. Didn't feel angry listening to him spiral. Didn't feel vindicated. Just felt distant, like I was listening to messages meant for someone else. At 10:45 a.m. I sent him one text. Just one. You told me to walk away. I did. Papers are filed. Don't come home tonight. Locks are being changed. Then I blocked his number. The finality of it was almost peaceful. Like closing a door that had been banging in the wind for months. But I wasn't done yet. What Levi didn't know, what nobody except Rebecca and Marcus knew, was that while he'd been sleeping soundly last night, I'd also been compiling a detailed file about the affair. Not just for the divorce but for his company's HR department. The file included everything. Marcus's photos of Levi and Sienna entering and leaving the Kimpton Hotel. Timestamps from hotel security footage that my private investigator Diane had somehow obtained. I didn't ask how, just paid her invoice. Credit card receipts for the room charges. A formal written complaint citing workplace ethics violations, specifically the company's strict anti-fraternization policy. I'd done my research. Their company had a zero-tolerance policy for managers having romantic relationships with direct reports. It was in the employee handbook, in the ethics code they all signed annually, in the training modules they had to complete. Levi was Sienna's direct supervisor. He approved her time off, her performance reviews, her raise requests. The affair wasn't just unprofessional, it was a terminable offense. I'd sent the entire file to HR at 3 a.m. marked urgent, with a cover letter explaining that I was the spouse of an employee engaged in an inappropriate relationship that violated company policy. By noon Marcus texted, Levi just got called into Sienna too. Separately. The office is going absolutely insane. Nobody's getting any work done. Everyone's just standing around in clusters talking about it. By 2 p.m., security just escorted them both out of the building. Suspension pending investigation. Hazel, this is wild. I've never seen anything like this. By 4 p.m., official email just went out to the whole company. They're both being investigated for ethics violations. People are forwarding it to each other, talking in the break rooms. Your husband's career here is done. Even if they don't fire him, he'll never recover from this. I read the messages while sitting at my kitchen table, drinking iced tea, feeling absolutely nothing except a quiet sense that justice was finally catching up to people who'd thought they were clever enough to avoid consequences. At 6 p.m. Rebecca called instead of texting. Hazel, you need to see something. I'm forwarding a screenshot right now. My phone buzzed. I opened the image. It was a text exchange between Levi and Sienna. Apparently, Sienna had submitted it to HR as part of her defense, trying to prove she wasn't entirely at fault. Levi had written, "This is your fault. If you hadn't been so obvious at the gala, none of this would have happened. You touched me in front of everyone. You couldn't be subtle for one night. I'm done with you. Don't contact me again." So he was throwing her under the bus to save himself. Classic Levi. Always looking for someone else to blame. Always repositioning himself as the victim of circumstances beyond his control. Sienna's response was even better. I'm not the one who's married, Levi. You told me you were separated. You said your wife didn't understand you, that the divorce was already in progress, that you were just waiting to finalize paperwork. You lied to me. You used me. I'm talking to a lawyer about filing my own complaint against you for sexual harassment. They were turning on each other, burning down everything to try to save themselves. And neither of them had enough water to put out the fire. They're both finished, Rebecca said on the phone, satisfaction clear in her voice. The company can't keep either of them after this. Too much liability, too much drama, too much proof of policy violations. And the fact that they're now publicly blaming each other makes it even easier to terminate both of them. Good, I said simply. That evening I had a locksmith come to the house. He changed every lock, front door, back door, garage, side gate. Gave me 3 copies of each new key, removed the old locks entirely so Levi's keys would be completely useless. Then I systematically changed every password I had. Bank accounts, streaming services, cloud storage, social media, every digital thing that connected us. I removed his access, his ability to see what I was doing, his ability to interfere. I packed his clothes into garbage bags, not carefully folded, just stuffed in, and carried them out to the front porch. His suits, his casual clothes, his shoes, his toiletries from the bathroom. Everything that was his. I left them in a pile with a note written on the back of an old envelope. You can collect these by Sunday. After that, they're going to Goodwill. Then I went back inside my house, not our house anymore, my house, and locked the new locks behind me. The house felt different with the new locks. Safer somehow. Like I'd fortified something that had been vulnerable for too long. I spent the rest of that evening organizing, going through drawers and closets, removing anything that reminded me of Levi, creating piles of things to donate or throw away. I was in the middle of clearing out the hall closet when I heard a car pull into the driveway. 8 p.m. Right on schedule. I walked to the living room window and watched Levi get out of his car. He looked terrible. Shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled in a way that suggested he'd been running his hands through it all day. He walked toward the front door with his key already in hand, probably expecting one last chance to talk me down, to explain things, to negotiate his way back into the house and the marriage. I watched him insert the key. Watched him try to turn it. Watched the confusion cross his face when it didn't work. He tried again, jiggling the key, pushing harder against the door like maybe he just wasn't doing it right. Nothing. The lock had been changed. His key was useless. Then he started knocking. Light at first, almost polite. Hazel. Hazel, open the door. I know you're in there. I let him knock for a full 5 minutes. Let him escalate from polite knocking to frustrated pounding to desperate hammering. Let him call my name progressively louder until a neighbor across the street came out onto their porch to see what the commotion was about. Then I walked to the door and opened it with the security chain still latched. Just a 4-inch gap between us. What are you doing here? I asked calmly. He looked shocked that I'd actually answered. What do you mean, what am I doing here? This is my house. I live here. Why doesn't my key work? Because I changed the locks. His face went from confused to angry in seconds. You can't do that. This is my house too. We own it together. Not anymore. My attorney filed for exclusive use of the property pending divorce proceedings. You're trespassing. Trespassing? Hazel, this is insane. You can't just... His voice was getting louder, more aggressive. Open this door. We need to talk about this like adults. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choices. I made mine. I made a mistake, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I made a mistake. But this... He gestured wildly at the chain-latched door, at the garbage bags of his clothes still sitting on the porch. This is too far. You're destroying everything over one mistake. I almost laughed. One mistake. You had an affair for 7 weeks. You lied to me every Wednesday and Friday for almost 2 months. You humiliated me at a public event. You told me to walk away. And now you want to call all of that one mistake. You're twisting. Your stuff is on the porch. Take it and leave. If you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. His face went from red to purple. You can't do this. This is my home too. I have rights. You had months to think about your rights when you were sleeping with Sienna. You chose her. Now grab your things and go. Hazel, please. I closed the door. Latched it. Walked away while he continued knocking and calling my name. Eventually I heard him cursing, heard him dragging the garbage bags to his car, heard his trunk slam multiple times. Heard him sit in his car for another 20 minutes. Probably trying to figure out where he was going to sleep, who he could call at 8 p.m. on a Monday night to ask for a couch to crash on. Finally the engine started. He drove away. I looked out the window and watched his taillights disappear down the street, and I felt absolutely nothing. Over the next week, the destruction spread through Levi's life like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. Marcus kept me updated, not because I asked but because he seemed to think I deserved to know how thoroughly Levi's world was imploding. HR concluded their investigation by Wednesday. They didn't have much choice when presented with time-stamped photos, hotel records, and conflicting statements from both parties trying to blame each other. On Wednesday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd served him with divorce papers, Levi received his termination notice. Fired for ethics violations, for having a romantic relationship with a direct report, for creating a hostile work environment, for bringing disrepute to the company. The letter cited multiple policy violations and ended his employment effective immediately with no severance package. Sienna was terminated the same day. Marcus forwarded me the company-wide email, carefully worded to avoid legal issues but clear enough that everyone understood what had happened. 2 employees had been terminated for violating the company's ethics code and anti-fraternization policy. An investigation had found evidence of an inappropriate relationship between a manager and his direct report. The company took these matters seriously and had zero tolerance for such behavior. But that wasn't even the most damaging part for Sienna. Turns out this wasn't her first office affair. She'd been sleeping with another married executive 6 months before Levi, a VP in sales who'd quietly resigned when his wife found out. The company had swept it under the rug then, but now with a pattern emerging they wanted to make a statement. They wouldn't tolerate employees who made a habit of inappropriate workplace relationships. Both their careers in Phoenix were essentially over. Word spread fast in our industry. Companies talk to each other, HR departments share information about problem employees, reputations get destroyed in email chains and phone calls that nobody admits happened. I knew it was spreading because people at my own office started treating me differently. More sympathetic. More careful. Like I was fragile and might break if they said the wrong thing. My boss, Jennifer, pulled me aside Tuesday morning. Hazel, I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. If you need time off, just say the word. We can cover your accounts. I'm fine, I said. Actually, I'd rather work. Keeping busy helps. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. If you change your mind, the offer stands. And if there's anything else you need. I'm okay. Really. My closest colleague, Amanda, brought me coffee Thursday morning without being asked. Set it on my desk with a sympathetic smile and didn't mention why. Just squeezed my shoulder and went back to her cubicle. People knew. They were being kind. And I appreciated it, even though it made me feel exposed in a way I wasn't entirely comfortable with. But I didn't need time off. I needed routine. I needed numbers that made sense and problems that had solutions and work that existed completely separate from the chaos of my personal life. Levi tried everything to reach me that week. He sent emails from his personal account, long rambling messages that alternated between apologizing and blaming me for overreacting. I blocked his email address after the 3rd one. He called from different numbers, probably borrowed phones from friends or maybe new burner phones he'd bought specifically to get around my blocks. I sent every call to voicemail, deleted the messages without listening to them. On Thursday afternoon he showed up at my office building. I was at my desk working on a compliance audit when Amanda rushed over, voice low and urgent. Hazel, your husband is downstairs in the lobby. Security called up asking if you want to see him. My hands stopped moving on the keyboard. Tell them no. Tell them to escort him out and not let him back in. Are you sure? He seems. I'm sure. Please. She nodded and went back to her desk to call down. 5 minutes later, Marcus texted, Levi just got escorted out of your building by security. He's sitting in his car in the parking lot. Want me to call the police? I responded, no. He'll leave eventually. He did. An hour later, his car was gone. On Friday morning, Levi's mother called. I saw her name on my screen and almost didn't answer. Patricia had always been kind to me, had welcomed me into their family, had treated me like the daughter she'd never had. But she was also Levi's mother, and I knew whose side she'd take. I answered anyway. "Hello, Patricia." "Hazel, sweetheart." Her voice was shaky, tearful, desperate. "Please, we need to talk." "I don't think there's anything to talk about. Levi told me everything. He made a terrible mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. But you can't throw away 6 years over one mistake. He loves you. He's absolutely devastated." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "Patricia, with all respect, Levi didn't make one mistake. He had an affair for 7 weeks. He lied to me every Wednesday and Friday for 2 months. He humiliated me in front of his colleagues. And when I confronted him about it, he told me to walk away. So I did. I respected his wishes." Silence on the other end. Then quieter. "He's my son, Hazel. He's falling apart. He's lost his job, his home, his marriage. Everything. I've never seen him like this." "Then maybe he'll learn something from it. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind?" "Nothing at all. No. I'm sorry. I know this is hard for you and I know you love your son. But this is between Levi and me. And it's already over." She tried for another few minutes, pleading, reasoning, bargaining. Offering to pay for couples counseling, suggesting we take time apart to think, asking if there was any way to fix this. I listened patiently and said no to everything. Finally, she gave up. "I understand. I don't agree, but I understand. You'll always be welcome in our home, Hazel. No matter what happens." "Thank you. That means a lot." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at nothing for a long moment. That conversation had been harder than I expected. Patricia was collateral damage in this. Someone who hadn't done anything wrong but was suffering anyway because of her son's choices. My own parents had the opposite reaction when I told them everything. My mother called Sunday morning. I gave her the full story, the affair, the gala, the divorce papers, the terminations, all of it. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said 4 words that made me cry for the first time since the night of the gala. "We're proud of you." My throat tightened. "Really? Really? You didn't make yourself small to keep a man who didn't deserve you. You didn't accept crumbs when you deserved the whole meal. You stood up for yourself. That takes courage." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "It doesn't feel courageous. It feels like surviving." Sometimes those are the same thing. Sunday afternoon, I was sorting through bank statements for Rebecca, organizing everything she'd need for the divorce proceedings, when I found something that stopped me cold. A $12,000 withdrawal from our savings account. Date, June 23rd. Memo line, ring purchase. I stared at it for a long moment, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. We'd made that savings account for a house down payment. For our future together. And Levi had taken $12,000 out of it 2 months ago. For a ring. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone and called Rebecca. "Can you check something for me? I need to know if Levi purchased jewelry in late June. Specifically around June 23rd. Give me a few minutes." She called back 40 minutes later. "Tiffany and Company at Scottsdale Fashion Square. June 23rd. 1 engagement ring. Purchase price, $11,847. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, unable to speak. "Hazel, you still there?" "He bought her an engagement ring," I whispered. "With our money. While we were still married. He was planning to leave me for her. Forward me that bank statement. I'm adding this to the divorce filing. This is fraud, Hazel. He used marital assets to finance an affair." I hung up and sat on the kitchen floor for a long time, just breathing. Just processing. Up until that moment, some small part of me had wondered if I was overreacting. If maybe the affair had been a stupid mistake, a momentary lapse, something that could have been forgiven if I'd been willing to work through it. But he'd bought her an engagement ring. He'd been planning a future with her. He'd been preparing to leave me, and he'd been too much of a coward to tell me. I wasn't overreacting. If anything, I'd been too patient. I stayed on that kitchen floor for a long time after hanging up with Rebecca. Just sitting there with my back against the cabinets, staring at the bank statement in my hands, trying to reconcile the man I'd married with the man who'd bought an engagement ring for his mistress using money we'd saved together for our future. Eventually I got up. Forwarded the statement to Rebecca like she'd asked. Then I did what I'd been doing for weeks. I focused on moving forward. On building a life that didn't include Levi. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Arizona's no-fault laws meant we didn't have to prove wrongdoing or assign blame in court. We just had to demonstrate that the marriage was irretrievably broken, which wasn't difficult given that we'd been living separately for months and I had documentation of an affair that had cost both parties their jobs. We split everything 50-50 on paper. The savings account, the retirement funds, the equity in both our cars. But I kept the house. I'd been making 80% of the mortgage payments for the past 2 years anyway, even though Levi's ego had never let him acknowledge that his sales commissions had been declining while my salary had been steadily increasing. I kept the $38,000 I'd moved before filing. Rebecca argued successfully that I'd been protecting marital assets from being squandered, not hiding them. Levi didn't fight any of it. He signed the papers his attorney put in front of him, agreed to everything Rebecca proposed, seemed eager to just make it all go away as quickly as possible. 4 months after I'd served him at his office, the divorce was finalized. No drama, no contested hearings, no last-minute attempts to reconcile. Just a quiet Tuesday afternoon in a courtroom where a judge signed documents that officially ended 6 years of my life. I walked out of that courthouse alone, got in my car and drove home to a house that was finally, legally, completely mine. I should have felt something, relief, maybe, or grief, or at least some acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. That I just felt tired. Through Marcus, I heard updates about Levi's new life. He'd moved to Tucson, taken a sales job with a medical supply company at half the salary he'd been making in Phoenix. He was living in a 1-bedroom apartment near the university in a complex that Marcus described as functional but depressing. He'd gained weight. Let his appearance slide. Looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. Sienna had left Phoenix entirely. Moved back to Sacramento where her parents lived, was working retail at a Target while trying to rebuild a career that had been destroyed by scandal. Her LinkedIn profile, which I'd looked at once out of morbid curiosity, showed no new positions, no recommendations, no activity at all beyond the Target job. They'd both burned their lives down for a 3-month affair, and now they were living in the ashes separately. I thought I'd never see either of them again. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, 4 months after the divorce was finalized. I'd stopped at a coffee shop in Scottsdale on my way home from work. One of those upscale places with reclaimed wood tables and Edison bulb lighting and a chalkboard menu that listed drinks I couldn't pronounce. I ordered my usual afternoon latte, stood at the pickup counter scrolling through work emails while I waited. Hazel. The voice came from behind me. Female. Familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten even before I turned around. Tina. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked completely different from the confident, put-together woman I'd seen at the gala. Thinner. Not in a healthy way but in a way that suggested she'd lost weight from stress rather than intention. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite cover. Wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt that hung loose on her frame, blonde highlights grown out to reveal dark roots, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like someone who'd been through something devastating. Which I supposed she had. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Please." The coffee shop was busy. People working on laptops at every table, a line forming behind me at the counter, the hiss of the espresso machine and low murmur of conversation creating white noise that wasn't quite private but wasn't completely public either. I picked up my latte when the barista called my name. "We have nothing to talk about. Please. Just 5 minutes. I know I don't have any right to ask but..." Her voice cracked slightly. "Please." Against every instinct telling me to walk away, against my better judgment, against the part of me that knew this conversation couldn't possibly end well, I gestured toward a corner table. We sat. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself, even though it was September in Arizona and still 95 degrees outside. "I wanted to apologize," she started. I almost laughed. "Almost. You're about 4 months too late." I know I am. But I needed to see you to tell you face to face that I'm sorry. For everything." "Hey, you've said it. Are we done?" She flinched. "I need you to understand something. I didn't know he was lying. About being separated, about you not knowing about us, about the divorce being in progress. He told me you two had an arrangement. That the marriage was open. That you both dated other people and it wasn't a secret. I stared at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to believe she was that naive, that she'd genuinely been fooled by Levi's lies. But I'd seen her at that gala. Seen the satisfaction in her eyes when Levi dismissed me. Seen how she touched him, performed intimacy with my husband right in front of me without a trace of guilt or uncertainty. You thought I didn't know? I said quietly. Even at the fundraiser when I was standing right there watching you touch him, when he told me to leave and you just stood there smiling, you thought I was okay with it? Her face crumbled. I thought he said you had an understanding. That you both had been living separate lives for years, that the marriage was over and everything but paperwork. He was so convincing, Hazel. He showed me texts that he said were from you agreeing to see other people. He had explanations for everything. He's a salesman, Sienna. Being convincing is literally his job. It's what he does for a living. He makes people believe things that benefit him. She started crying. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down her face while she stared at her coffee cup. I know that now. But when you're in it, when someone's telling you exactly what you want to hear, it's hard to see the lies. I felt nothing watching her cry. No satisfaction, no anger, no sympathy. Just a hollow emptiness where stronger emotions probably should have been. I lost everything, she whispered. My job. My reputation. My apartment. I couldn't afford rent after getting fired and my roommate kicked me out because she didn't want the drama. I had to move back in with my parents in Sacramento. I'm 26 years old, sleeping in my childhood bedroom, working at Target because I can't get a reference from my last job. Every interview I go to, they Google my name and find out what happened. My career is over before it really started. I took a sip of my latte, letting the silence stretch. Then, you made your choices. You chose to sleep with a married man. Maybe he lied to you, I actually believe he probably did. But you still made that choice. And choices have consequences. I know. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm trying to explain. You don't need to explain. I understand perfectly. You wanted something that belonged to someone else and you took it without caring who got hurt. The only difference between you and Levi is that he had more to lose. But you're both the same kind of selfish. She looked up at me, mascara smudged around her red eyes. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know nothing I say will make this better. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. For believing him. For not asking more questions. For hurting you. I stood up, gathering my purse and coffee. Looked down at this woman who'd helped destroy my marriage and was now seeking some kind of absolution I had no intention of giving. Your apology doesn't change anything, I said. It doesn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. It doesn't erase the humiliation of watching my husband flirt with you in public while you smiled like you'd won something. And it definitely doesn't make me feel sorry for you. She looked up at me with those swollen eyes. What am I supposed to do now? Figure it out. The same way I did after your affair destroyed my marriage. The same way everyone does when they have to deal with the consequences of their choices. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. One last thing she needed to hear. For what it's worth, Sienna, Levi would have done this to you eventually too. Men who cheat don't suddenly become faithful just because they've upgraded to a newer model. If you'd ended up together, you would have been me in 5 years. Sitting at home wondering why he's working late so often, finding hotel receipts in his pockets, watching him flirt with the next young coworker. You didn't win anything. You just delayed your own heartbreak. Her face crumpled completely. I didn't wait to see if she'd respond. Just turned and walked out into the September heat, the automatic doors closing behind me, sealing off that conversation permanently. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, processing what had just happened. I'd thought seeing Sienna again would feel like something, closure maybe, or vindication. Instead, it just felt like looking at wreckage from an accident that had happened months ago. Just damage that was already done, consequences that were already playing out, lives that were already changed beyond repair. 2 weeks later, Marcus texted me, "Thought you should know. Levi tried calling Sienna yesterday. She blocked his number." I smiled at that. They'd burned down their entire lives for each other, destroyed careers and reputations and relationships, lost everything they'd built. And in the end, they didn't even want each other. That felt like justice. Not the dramatic, satisfying kind. Just the quiet, inevitable kind where people who make selfish choices end up alone with the consequences. I drove home from that coffee shop thinking about Sienna sitting alone at that table, crying into coffee that had probably gone cold. Thinking about Levi in his Tucson apartment, trying to reach out to the woman who'd helped destroy his marriage only to find himself blocked. Thinking about how they'd both burned everything down for each other and ended up with nothing but ashes. And I realized I didn't feel sorry for either of them anymore. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything except grateful that I'd gotten out when I did. 6 months after the divorce finalized, I made a decision that felt bigger than it probably was. I renovated the house. Not just redecorated, completely renovated. Stripped it down and rebuilt it into something that had nothing to do with Levi. I hired an interior designer named Maria Delgado who came recommended by Amanda from work. She was in her 50s, had an office in Old Town filled with fabric samples and paint swatches. And when I told her what I wanted, she understood immediately. I want to erase him from this space, I said during our first consultation. Every room reminds me of arguments we had about paint colors and furniture choices. I want it to feel like mine. She nodded like this wasn't the first time she'd heard this. Divorce renovation. I do 3 or 4 of these a year. Let's make this place yours. We started with the bedroom. Levi had insisted on what he called masculine minimalism. Gray walls, black furniture, no artwork, no color, no personality. Everything severe and cold and designed to look like a magazine spread instead of a place where people actually lived. Maria and I ripped it all out. Painted the walls a warm sage green. Bought a 4-poster bed made of light wood with white linen bedding that looked like something from a boutique hotel. Hung framed photographs on the walls. Not of people but of places I wanted to visit. The Amalfi Coast. Japanese cherry blossoms. Irish countryside. Dreams that were mine alone. I filled the room with plants. Pothos hanging from macrame holders. A fiddle leaf fig in the corner. Succulents on the windowsill. Things that were alive and growing, that needed care and attention, that made the space feel less like a museum and more like a sanctuary. We renovated the kitchen next. Levi had wanted everything stainless steel and modern. I replaced it all with warmer brass fixtures, open shelving instead of upper cabinets, a butcher block island where I could actually cook instead of just heating up takeout. His office. The room he'd spent hours in with the door closed, probably texting Sienna while I sat downstairs alone, I got rid of entirely. Turned it into a reading room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 3 walls. A window seat overlooking the backyard with cushions in deep blue. A comfortable chair with good lighting. A space that was entirely about peace and quiet and the pleasure of getting lost in stories that weren't mine. Every change felt like reclaiming territory. Like pushing out the ghost of a marriage that had never really worked and making space for a life that actually fit me. The renovation took 3 months and cost more than it probably should have. $42,000 by the time everything was done. But when Maria and I did the final walkthrough in late November, standing in the living room looking at warm cream walls and comfortable furniture and artwork that I'd chosen because I liked it, not because Levi had approved it, it was worth every dollar. This doesn't look like the same house, Maria said. That's exactly what I wanted. 2 months after the renovation finished in January, my boss Jennifer called me into her office. I'd been expecting a routine check-in. We did quarterly reviews and I figured this was just standard procedure. So I was surprised when she closed the door and gestured for me to sit with an expression that looked too serious for a routine check-in. Hazel, I'm promoting you to Senior Director of Operations. I blinked. What? You've been carrying this department for the past year. Especially the past 6 months since everything happened in your personal life. You've shown leadership and resilience that honestly impressed everyone here. The Henderson audit you led came in under budget and ahead of schedule. The Morrison Foundation specifically requested you for their next engagement. You've trained 3 junior accountants who are now billing clients independently. You've earned this. I sat there stunned, unable to process what she was saying. The position comes with a 30% raise, a corner office on the 5th floor and your own team of 4. You'll report directly to me. Congratulations. I don't know what to say. Jennifer smiled. Say yes. Then go celebrate. You've earned this, Hazel. So I said yes. The promotion meant longer hours sometimes. More responsibility. More pressure. Late nights reviewing teamwork, making decisions that affected other people's careers, representing the company at client meetings where I was suddenly the most senior person in the room. But it also meant something else. It meant proving to myself that I was more than someone's discarded wife. That I was good at my job, better than good. That I was valuable independent of any relationship status. That my worth had never been tied to Levi's opinion of me, even though I'd forgotten that somewhere in the middle of our marriage. In October I did something I hadn't planned. I went to the Arizona Humane Society on a Sunday afternoon, told myself I was just looking, and left with 2 6-year-old cats. They were a bonded pair, Fig and Olive, already named by the shelter staff. Their previous owner had surrendered them because she was moving into a no-pet apartment. They'd been at the shelter for 3 weeks, overlooked because they were older and came as a package deal. Fig was gray and scraggly with one eye that didn't quite open all the way. Olive was orange with white paws and an attitude problem. They were completely uninterested in performing or being cute for potential adopters. When I sat down in the meet and greet room, Fig immediately climbed into my lap and started purring. Olive sat 3 feet away and judged me silently. I loved them immediately. They brought unexpected comfort to the house. The sound of them chasing each other at 3 a.m., racing through rooms with that chaotic energy cats have. The way Fig would curl up on my lap in the reading room while I worked through books I'd been meaning to read for years. How Olive would sit on the bathroom counter every morning, watching me get ready for work with an expression that suggested she found my routine deeply questionable. I started cooking again. Actually cooking from recipes I found online or in cookbooks I'd bought but never used. Trying things I'd wanted to make but never did because Levi was particular about food. Didn't like anything too spicy, didn't eat fish, refused to try cuisines he wasn't familiar with. I made Thai curry that left my kitchen smelling like lemongrass for 2 days. Mastered homemade pasta. Experimented with baking bread on Sunday mornings. Some of it turned out terribly. Some of it was amazing. All of it was mine. I joined a book club at the local library. 8 women ranging from their 30s to their 70s who met every other Thursday evening to discuss novels and drink wine and occasionally gossip about their lives. They knew I was recently divorced, but nobody made it a big deal. Nobody treated me like I was broken or needed fixing. They just passed me wine and argued about whether the ending of our current book was satisfying or cheap. I started hiking again. Sunday mornings, early before it got too hot, driving out to Camelback Mountain or Piestewa Peak, or sometimes just walking trails in the McDowell Sonoran Preserve. Something I'd loved before I got married and had somehow stopped doing because Levi preferred sleeping in on weekends. I started dating again. Nothing serious. A coffee date with a tax attorney named David who made me laugh talking about the absurdities of tax code. Dinner with a high school teacher named Rachel I'd met through book club who was smart and funny and recently divorced herself. A few other dates that went nowhere but weren't bad, just 2 people trying to figure out if there was anything there. I learned what I liked without filtering it through someone else's opinion. Learned that I preferred hiking to sleeping in. That I actually enjoyed cooking when I wasn't trying to please someone else's palate. That I was more social than I'd realized. I'd just been with someone who made me feel like my need for connection was neediness instead of normal human behavior. A year after the divorce, almost to the day, I was sitting in my reading room on a Saturday morning. Fig was curled up beside me, purring in his sleep. Olive was somewhere else in the house, probably knocking something off a shelf. My coffee was getting cold on the side table while I lost myself in a novel. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. Text from an unknown number. Hazel, it's Levi. I got a new phone. I know you blocked my other number. I just wanted to reach out and see how you're doing. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About us. I made terrible mistakes and I'm sorry. I've done a lot of therapy this past year and I realize now what I threw away. Is there any chance we could talk? Get coffee? I'm not asking you to take me back, I just miss you and I'd like to see you. Please consider it. I read it 3 times. Waited for some feeling to surface. Anger, satisfaction, grief, vindication, anything. But there was nothing. Just a distant recognition that this person used to matter to me and now he didn't. I didn't respond. Just blocked the number, deleted the message and went back to my book. And that's when I knew I'd actually moved on. Not because I'd stopped being angry, that had happened months ago. Not because I'd forgiven him, I hadn't and probably never would. But because Levi's attempt to re-enter my life didn't even register as important. He'd become irrelevant. A chapter that was finished. A mistake I'd learned from. Nothing more. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet except for the cats purring and the distant sound of the neighborhood settling into sleep, I think about that moment at the gala. When Levi told me to walk away, he'd meant it as a dismissal. A power play. A way to put me in my place while he continued his affair in plain sight, while Sienna watched and smiled. He had no idea he was giving me permission to leave a marriage that had been dead for months. I just hadn't realized it yet. Walking away wasn't the punishment Levi thought he was delivering. It was the escape route I didn't know I needed. And in walking away, in actually doing what he'd told me to do, I found exactly who I was meant to be all along. Someone who refuses to tolerate disrespect. Who protects herself strategically. Who understands that sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while your betrayer watches their life implode from a distance you control. Levi told me to walk away. So I did. And I built a life so much better than the one I left behind that I never once looked back.